Nathaniel Drew is not your regular lifestyle YouTuber. I mean, if you look at him, he looks like your generic normie, okay? But if you look deep into his eyes, into his big, cute Hanto eyes, there's something more in it. First, let me paraphrase the famous philosopher Slavoj Zizek. YouTube is the ultimate pervert art. It doesn't give you what you desire. It tells you how to desire. It doesn't tell you that you should do more and move more, just like Kaze nice tattoo, just for the sake of being busy all the time and self-referential orbital capitalism. Unlike Matt Devella is not telling you that you should be minimalist, have less stuff so you can fetishize them even more, pay back your debt to the state, and just enjoy your global recession. And it doesn't tell you either that you should just pursue your dreams, whatever they are, especially if they consist of a garage selling your way to becoming a billionaire, like Gary Vee. No, none of that. Nathaniel just tells you to be curious. Just like a few other YouTubers, Damon Dominic or Sorelma, who all happen to be closer to Europe than to America, he promotes a kind of more Epicurean lifestyle. The good wine, good cheese, friends, family, art, that's what Nathaniel is showing you. He's not showing you him electric skating or making business phone calls in a Uber cab. Why is it new in the American cultural and ideological landscape? Why all the people promoting this kind of lifestyle tend to be closer to Europe? And is this the start of a materialist shift in America? We'll find out. To answer this question, let's dive into the American psyche, if you will. Centuries ago, in his book Democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville talks about the American spirit. He says that the first American immigrants from Europe wanted to grow and to conquer. They could, so they did. Americans worked hard and they were very happy about it, because hard work is actually very fulfilling when it makes you rich and richer. But nowadays, hard work doesn't pay as much as in the good old days. The conquest of America is over, and infinite growth seems to be over as well. The American frontier seems to be closed.
Ever hear of Frederick Turner, Mr. Oliver?
No, sir.
Well, he was an historian. About 100 years ago, he came up with a theory about the frontier. Said the frontier was a safety valve for civilization, a place for people to go to keep from going mad. So, whenever there were folks who couldn't fit in with the way things were, nuts, malcontents, and extremists, they'd pack up and head for the frontier. That's how America got started. All the crackpots and troublemakers in Europe packed up and went to a frontier which became the 13 colonies. When some people couldn't fit in with that, they moved farther west, which is why all the nuts eventually ended up in California.
What about space? The final frontier.
And that after the moon, there would be space stations and moon bases. And after that, we would go to Mars. And after that, we would expand still further. Or once it became clear that that kind of exploration and certainly settlement wasn't going to be possible in the immediate future, I think a horizon did disappear. And we were sort of left alone with ourselves, with nowhere else to go. And I think that feeling contributes to the larger patterns of sterility and exhaustion.
Whatever the reason, we don't have flying cars in space. And when we drive our rolling cars on the roads, we ask ourselves questions and we feel like we've been fucked. In his book, Tocqueville talks about how Americans seems to be so obsessed with always feeling good. When the things are mingled and privileges destroyed, when patrimonies divide and enlightenment and liberty spread, the desire to gain well-being occurs to the imagination of the poor, and the fear of losing it to the mind of the rich. It is a strange thing to see with what sort of feverish ardor Americans pursue well-being and how they show themselves constantly tormented by a vague fear of not having chosen the shortest route that can lead to it. So that may be why American people feel like they have to enjoy all the time, just like Coca Cola reminds them.
In our postmodern, however we call them, societies, we are obliged to enjoy. Enjoyment becomes a kind of a weird, perverted duty.
And Nathaniel is refreshing because he knows and he lets you know that you don't have to enjoy. It makes you realize, just like James Baldwin, that actually we can live without Coca Cola.
Et ça commence maintenant, en fait.
Tocqueville also writes something very interesting. He says that the value of work is very democratic and very un-aristocratic. What Tocqueville says is that in aristocratic society, the nobles, the aristocrats, they want to not work because it proves that they are not poor people who have to do daily jobs. Not working is a proof of their privilege. As a result, the society in France and in England and in many parts of Europe, the whole society promotes not working and think it's a proof of luxury, of privilege. And the reason they don't value so much work as Americans is not because they are extreme dirty socialists, it's just because they have a lot of aristocratic values. But in America, where there is no aristocracy, hard work is a very important value. And that may be why Nathaniel feels better in Paris, despite its stinky cheese and heavy bureaucracy.
This is the second time that I am living in France, and I'm more at home in this country than any other country I've lived in, the United States included.
And this ideological shift fits well with moving to a European city because, I don't know for other cities, but Paris at least, is very organized toward people's happiness. Like, you go to the flea market and read some free book from the library at a cafe terrace surrounded by sophisticated architecture. All of this is not Stoic, it's not minimalist, and it's not hard work. It's just Epicurean, ornamentalist, and art. Nathaniel calls these videos pieces. Because he thinks of them as pieces of art. Recently, he took a break from YouTube because he wanted to. And also, Nathaniel sleeps every night 8 hours. And he's not shy about it, he's not trying to sleep less than that.
I don't know when this happened, but people started deciding it was okay to cut back on sleep for the hustle or the grind. However, I discovered that sleep, for me, is a non-negotiable. 8 is my magic number. If I can get 8 hours a night, I'm good.
Unlike Beyoncé or 50 Cent, Nathaniel doesn't believe that you should give up sleep for hard work.
Said, when do you sleep, 50? Sleep, he says sleep. Sleep is for those people who are broke.
He's more like the teacher of virtue in Nietzsche's book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
A sage was praised to Zarathustra for knowing how to speak well of sleep and virtue. He was said to be honored and rewarded highly for this.
So this guy says that no small art is it to sleep. It is necessary for that purpose to keep awake all day.
He says honor sleep and be bashful before it, that first of all, and avoid all who sleep badly and stay awake at night. Shall I bear false witness? Shall I commit adultery? Shall I covet my neighbor's maid? All that would go ill with good sleep.
But Nietzsche didn't like this idea, I was making fun of it. But Nathaniel is not trying to become some kind of Übermensch, and he's not trying to conquer America. He's just trying to be happy in Europe.
My definition of success is now moving more and more towards having a solid sense of well-being and taking care of myself.
I'm simply not Steve Jobs or Harry Potter.
But why would Epicureanism and a more materialist philosophy rise among Americans today? There are very economical and material reasons for this, but it might also be related to the rise of atheism. Skepticism and atheism are growing in America. And when people become atheist, they tend to become more materialist and also communist. In his doctoral thesis, Karl Marx talked about the link between Epicureanism and more political philosophy. Karl Marx was really into ancient Greek philosophy, and that might be where he got most of his ideology. When people don't see the world to a higher meaning or a bigger lens, they tend to just look for the simple pleasures of life. Stoicism might seem cool and alternative nowadays, but really, it's just the basis for Roman Christianity. Historically, it's just the source of more traditional Western values. Epicureanism is the real game changer in America. Nathaniel's logo is an ice cream, and ice cream are simply good for you. To enjoy ice cream, you don't need some funny theoretical view of the world, like the Stoics, who thought that we lived in the best possible worlds, and that the world was Zeus himself. or something. So Nathaniel is an Epicurean, but is he an atheist? Not really. But Epicure himself was not really an atheist, actually. Epicurus thought the gods had no impact on the world, which 2,300 years ago was as political edgy as you could get, without being forced to drink poisonous herbal tea. So Epicure was a semi-atheist. He believed in the gods, but he didn't care about them much. What does Nathaniel think of God? He does use the three-letter J word in his videos, but he doesn't seem to be very religious. He seems very secular.
Some claim that God is simply fiction, but that's meaningless to me because we are a race governed by stories.
And the rise of secularism has a big impact in the world. According to the anthropologist and demographer Emmanuel Todd, when people lose their faith in their religion, their values, their religious values, become stronger and wilder in a political and secular way. For example, the Russians and the Germans, when they lost their faith, because, you know, Gott Ist, Todd, they got into very radical political ideology. And they didn't get the same kind of political radicalism, if you know what I mean. The German, they got Nazism, and the Russian, they got communism. One is very inequalitarian, and the other is very equalitarian. Emmanuel Todd observed that the Russian family is very equalitarian. That means that the farmer in medieval Russia would share his land equally between his children. Unlike in Germany, where the farmers would give all his land to his eldest son. It's a very unequal system in Germany. And this dates back to the Middle Age. So after centuries and centuries of inequality or centuries of equality, the people is very equalitarian and they are communist, or they are very aristocratic, very inequalitarian, and they become Nazi. Anthropology is very simple, right? Also, the Germans and the Russians, they both like authority, and the reason for that is that in Russian and German classic traditional farmers' family, you would have the parents living with the children and the grandparents, and this kind of big community needs a patriarch, a big authority. The father must be respected in this kind of family unit. Whereas in France, in England, or in America, the family stayed kind of nuclear, which means that the children, when they want to move and make new children and create a new family unit, well, they would just leave their parents and create a new household. So the French, the English, the American, they always like liberty. They don't like the authority of the father or the family. And that's maybe why they didn't have to deal with totalitarianism during the 20th century. Because their family structure was more nuclear and not so much about a community. And the children, they didn't have to obey their parents, their grandparents, and so on forever. So authoritarianism was not very common and very natural for the West until now. It seems like Europe is getting into a new form of liberal extremism. In this part of the world where atheism and secularism has been there for much longer than in America, people seem to start enjoying state authority. It's not communism, it's not fascism. People have much more imagination than that, and they can make up some new kind of totalitarianism. Like a kind of liberal, free market, anarcho-bureaucratic fascism. Or some people just call it the extreme center.
The kind of politics we have now, where the left is represented by this kind of Obama-Macron-style centrism, where you're both for the market and for bureaucracy at the same time, is kind of horrible, right? The only possible appeal of that kind of politics is, well, at least they're not Nazis, right? In France, sometimes they talk about the extreme center, and I think that's a fitting phrase. It strikes me that what's called the moderates are the most immoderate people possible.
And now that Americans need to fill their inner existential void that comes from the closing of the frontier and the loss of their faith, they could become extreme centrist as well. I don't know where Europe is going really. I have no idea. Europe has been following USA for so long and it didn't work that well. But now it seems like Europe is going its own way and it doesn't smell that good. But at the same time, just like Nathaniel, it seems like USA want to go back to its European roots and become more Epicurean, secular and socialist. But I hope they stop there and don't follow Europe all the way down the extreme center.
Le rêve européen qui a créé l'Amérique prouve maintenant d'être trop cher pour le monde.
Il y a peut-être un nouveau rêve qui commence.
Ah. Certainement. Certainement. L'avenir peut être pire que le passé.